Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Core Network's latest webinar. Guess we will get started and let people trickle in. I'm Hannah Travers. I work on the communications team at the Core Network. Our comms team is proud to help plan all of the Core Network's virtual and in-person events, including today's webinar. So a quick reminder that, as always, you can find information about our webinars and other events under the Events tab on corenetwork.org. And we also share about all of our upcoming events on social media and in the Crew Leader, our newsletter for core staff. So before we jump in, just a few housekeeping reminders. Please make sure you're on mute. We do, of course, invite you to drop any questions you might have in the chat, and we'll get to those first when we get to the Q&A portion of the session. Captions are turned on for the Zoom meeting. So in your Zoom window, you should see an option in the lower toolbar to turn on captions. You might need to click the little three dots under the More button if you don't see it. The session is being recorded, and we will post it on our website later today or by tomorrow morning. And again, you can find it if you go to the Events tab, click Webinars, and then find the link for this event. And please stick around at the end of the session. We'll do a few reminders from the Core Network, and then when you close out of the meeting, there will be a survey that pops up. We really appreciate your responses to the survey, and we use the feedback we get to help plan future sessions. So for today's topic, we are really excited to be joined by Roadtrip Nation. For more than 20 years, Roadtrip Nation, they have started with a vision to hit the road and talk to people in the workforce and get honest advice on how to find rewarding, meaningful work. And they discovered, of course, that there is no one path to build a fulfilling career. And over the years, Roadtrip Nation has developed tools to help you learn from people in the workforce and explore how to align your interests with your career path. At the heart of their work, they still do road trips. They send small groups of young adults out on the road to capture interviews with working professionals and use those to help inform and inspire others. So today we'll learn about some of Roadtrip Nation's career exploration tools. We'll hear about their approach to storytelling, and you'll also hear about how young adults from your organization might have the opportunity to join a road trip. So let's jump right in. I will pass it off to Tim Hogan, who's Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Roadtrip Nation.
Great. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to the Core Network team. We've gotten to know each other over the last few years, and it's really exciting to kind of be at this point where we're showing some of the things that we have learned, and then some of the tools that are free and open and available to be used by you and your organizations. And we were actually just chatting before the call. It's not a question of how many resources and tools are out there and available for this kind of work. Understanding what they are and how they can be contextualized for the environment in which you're working with students or young adults is kind of the key here. So what we're hoping to do today is really give an overview of the Roadtrip Nation machine, if you will. That'll help kind of explain the philosophy of where we think we fit in a much larger ecosystem of people figuring out what they want to do with their lives and establishing stable careers and fulfilling lives, and so forth. So I'll start by kind of giving a bit of a demo of kind of how all of this works, and then dig into a couple of the tools that you all have available to you that we can send as a follow-up as well. And then there's also some opportunities for some of the young adults you all work with to potentially go on one of the road trips and be central to some of these projects. So hopefully all that'll start making a little bit more sense as I walk through this demo. Ali Lavin is also here from our team, who works really closely with me on our partnership development work and identifying the themes that we want to be covering from the production side of the house. And she also really just makes sure that we stay on the rails and keep the RVs running on time. Sorry, some of these transportation puns are natural for the work that we do, whether we mean to do it or not. So as we think about how we talk about our work at Roadtrip Nation, there's really kind of two main pieces of it. The first is really focused on the production work, the storytelling, broad narrative change about important socially and culturally relevant themes. But then the other part of the work, kind of the core of the mission, is what do we do with all that, right? Once we have this content, how can we put it in places, not just where it gets the initial eyeballs, but can actually be put in a context where it can be as helpful as possible? So the way we go about that from the storytelling standpoint, we are always looking to identify what these themes could be. We always have a bit of a running list of projects we know we want to get to because of the dialogue that we're hearing and what we're hearing from kind of experts in the career exploration in the workforce space. But at the same time, we get a lot of ideas suggested to us where we go, maybe it needs a little massaging, but that's a pretty darn good idea. Meaning people are coming to us with industries of growth that need a narrative to be addressed, not so much something that is, commercial, like trying to, push a new beverage product or suggesting that cigarettes are good for children or something like that. So we get good ideas that we get to work with. And so those tend to fall into one of three main buckets, but the buckets often merge together. So the first is focused on a particular geographic area. So this is a project we released in the state of Indiana, focusing on what the education and career pathways are within the state of Indiana. The idea is that there is a narrative, not just across the country, but even within high schools within Indiana, of what the opportunities actually are within the state. This is an agricultural state. These are the paths that are available to you. If you want something else or something more innovative, you're going to have to go somewhere else. That's not the case, and that's the reality is so many young adults are at the very least dealing with a part of the story, not the entirety of it, and sometimes they're dealing with the wrong information, right? Because that's what they've been exposed to that point, especially when they're looking at building their future career. The second could be focused specifically on a portion of the population. So whether that's formerly incarcerated individuals or Native American young adults or first-gen college students. And those really focus on telling stories of folks who have achieved success by showing examples of folks that are not normally in those particular roles or see that success. So for example, the Formerly Incarcerated Project shows that there are pathways post-incarceration into a successful career and back into the workforce, acknowledging the hurdles and twists that are involved in that process, but being able to show that it is possible by showing human examples of people who have gotten there. And then lastly, the third bucket is often focused on a particular industry. So a great example of that is the semiconductor industry. There's all kinds of conversations really building up more with each passing month about the massive growth that's going to be coming within the workforce within semiconductors. But what the heck does that mean? Not just what is a semiconductor, but how do you get into this work? And do I have to be a math brain to even consider entering this industry? And the reality is that is so far from the case, but you know what you know, right? And you know what you hear. So by focusing on these industries and kind of changing the narrative or even bringing the narrative to the surface, we're better equipping folks who are trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives with the right information about what's actually possible. And then the example I'm going to use to kind of go through the nuts and bolts of the production work is one of those kind of merged themes. This is a project we did that I think might be relevant to this group. This is a project we did focused on the state of New York, but focused on green jobs as looking at it essentially through an energy of the jobs that exist that are not being talked about enough and the jobs that are coming and the careers that are being built, in this case, within the state of New York. So from a production model standpoint, the way we go about this is we identify a group of individuals. They typically are young adults. The vast majority of our projects are young adults, but there are some projects we do with older adults who are at pivot points in their careers, but primarily a younger audience. Folks who are at the beginning journey of a particular theme. So in this case, we've got 3 young adults, live in the state of New York, are interested in pursuing careers that can have a positive influence on the environment, but don't necessarily know where to start or where to take the next step or what the options even truly are that they should be looking into. So once we identify them through an application process, teaser for something I'll probably mention at the end about the opportunity for you all and your students. But once we identify them through the application process, we put them in one of our big green RVs and they travel the state, the country, the region, depending on the scope of the project. They live in the RV for 3 or 4 weeks with our film crew. And the purpose of the trip is to sit down and conduct interviews with people who are a little further down the path that they want to be on or that they're considering putting themselves on. So in this case, individuals who have found unique ways to develop their own career path within the green job space, specifically in the state of New York, in this case. And so these conversations that they're having while they're out on the road are certainly about what the day-to-day is, right? Tell me about your job. What is it you do as a flight test engineer? But more so, they're about how you got there. So think about your LinkedIn profile. Think about how perfect it looks. Mine is fabulous, right? No bumps in the road, no mistakes along the way. And that's just not what happened, right? So if you're at the beginning of your journey and you're introduced to LinkedIn for the first time, all you see is perfection and you can't really understand, how am I going to find that? How am I going to find the starting point that will have no mistakes, that's going to lead me to success? When the reality is, all of our paths are nonlinear. Where things happen that lead us to important points in our careers are when we get let go from the perfect job, or lean heavily on a mentor, or have imposter syndrome. The real things that get us to successful points in our career and life are not what's talked about in kind of the bulleted list of things you need to do, or the description of the program that's going to help you find the right path. And that's the part of the process where we try to put our energy. The end results of all these interviews and this this 3 or 4 week road trip is a public television documentary. Sometimes they're episodic, like in this case. Sometimes they're hour long. Really depends on the scope of the project and how best to divide up the stories we are trying to tell here. And that releases across PBS stations across the U.S., reaches about 50 million households. We've been on the air for close to 20 years, so especially in the PBS world, that gives us a lot of longevity and a lot of relationships with those stations to know that they're going to place us in good spots, especially when we're creating new content. But this is also where we start to pivot into the other head on the monster, if you will, in terms of what do we do with all this content once it's created, beyond the full documentary, beyond the PBS release, of course. Each one of these conversations that we have out on the road allows us to create an additional 8 to 10 video segments. 30 seconds about leaning on those mentors, 90 seconds about getting let go from the perfect job, 60 seconds about not having any idea what you want to do next, even though there's some things you might be interested in. All those short form videos feed into this archive of about 12,000 videos that we're adding to constantly with all of these different production projects. And this is what we see as our responsibility, meaning where can we put this content and how can we contextualize it in a way that is helpful for those that need to hear it, right? Beyond just a public television audience. So there's a couple of ways that we do that. We are able to provide this content to guidance counselor platforms. So those of you who have access to the Naviance platform, our content is integrated into that platform. And we're actually working really closely right now to bring it even closer to the surface and rethink how it's positioned in that platform. But we also have built tools for Boys and Girls Clubs of America, the AVID program, workforce development boards, really trying to find those organizations that are already working with the audience, as opposed to creating another new island out here of content, and trying to be the cement between the stones for programs that we know are working. This is one example of one of our tools that's free and open and available to be used by any of you right now. And these are the kinds of things we can customize for some of our partners, national nonprofits and ed tech platforms and so forth. What this does is our roadmap tools allows you to start with things you might be interested in, right? So this isn't a 200 question assessment that's going to tell you this is your career, go get them. This is just for the exploration of what's possibly out there. So say that I'm possibly interested in technology, right? But I'm also a foodie, right? I'm trying to break the system, things that don't fit together. And I check things off a list, right? Accomplishing goals. What's out there for me? We're able to pull forward ONET data, labor market data that's repackaged to be a bit more engaging than a bulleted list of what a dietitian does on a daily basis. But we're also able to pull forward majors if the audience is pursuing a post-secondary pathway and is trying to figure out what they want to study at the next stage of their post-secondary career. But then our sweet spot in all of this are the people we've actually met who have those same interests that you just selected. So you're saying, I'm interested in you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. It's like, well, prove it. Show me somebody that's had a similar experience that I did, similar interests as me, how they got to where they are today. So with each one of these folks that we interview, we create one of these leader profiles, a little bit about the advice that they provide to those who are trying to figure out what their next step is going to be, certainly their interests, and then a little bit about the day in the life of their actual job. But then most importantly, how they got there. Happen to pick somebody who's got multiple graduate degrees. That is not the case for everybody in the archive. Plenty of folks who have graduated high school and not pursued education beyond that, or have stackable credentials. All these different options are woven into the interview archive. And then this core piece of kind of the gaps in your LinkedIn profile, as I like to refer to it, right? What were those twists and turns in your life that are not often referred to on a resume? And what were those defining moments about how you responded to what we call the noise around you to better understand what your next steps are going to be? I want to pause here and go back to the the road trip I was showing as an example, and the empowered state, the green energy jobs in the state of New York project, and play the video here, and just of these road trippers as they're kind of preparing for this project that they're about to go on. I think with the context I just provided, it makes it a little more, it can make a little more sense. Sometimes you hit play on this and go, that was fun and interesting. What is this thing? So hopefully that context will be helpful as we hit play on this. I am going to do one other technical thing to make sure that you'll be able to hear it when I hit play. So here we go. Give me just one moment. All right.
New York is close to my heart. Most of my family lives here. My parents grew up here.
It's kind of like its own microcosm. It's kind of this feeling of there's always something happening, no matter where you are or what time it is.
It's gorgeous. It's so beautiful and full of life and full of like different types of cultures and things like that. But the earth has like finite resources, and we're using the resources at like such a fast rate that if we keep going, it'll all be gone and we won't be able to enjoy it anymore.
It seems like there are those straightforward solutions right in front of us, and I guess that's what this road trip is for. Hopefully we'll be able to figure out like what's stopping us from jumping onto clean energy. So for the next 3 weeks,
I'll be traveling with Julia and David around New York, interviewing a bunch of leaders in sustainability and clean energy.
Normally, Roadtrip Nation takes these road trips in these big green RVs, but we're actually going to be in energy efficient vehicles for our trip. We're going to be interviewing leaders in a variety of spaces, including high efficiency buildings, heat pump technology, wind energy, solar energy, clean transportation.
I'm mostly excited just to like gain a new perspective on clean energy.
How do we make buildings create more energy than they even use? A net positive. How do we have zero carbon buildings? How do we make buildings more alive?
I'm excited to ask about their journey.
I'm really glad that you're on this road trip trying to explore, to take some time to think about who you are and how you fit into something and how you can create something new.
I'm looking forward to taking some of the stuff I've learned from this trip back to my life.
it seems like all three of us are super passionate about the field.
It'll be an adventure. We'll all get to know each other, and I'm sure we'll be like super close. It kind of reminds me of like camp.
All right, I'm going to show one other tool and then open it up. So for questions or anything else we can dig a little bit deeper into. But as you can see, kind of just from the reflections of the three road trippers on that particular project, the sentiment of I've got an interest, I don't know what to do with it is fairly common, even though there are some who are not even sure what it is they're interested in yet. And maybe that's even more of a justification for exploring what the possibilities are. But from there, on a bigger scale, what we've learned from the impact assessments that we've done for these projects is one of the most important things that they're gaining from this is not just information about what the jobs are now, but the social capital and the social capital building skills that are necessary, as we all understand, for building and driving our careers. So we often talk about it's all who you know. It's like, well, if that's the case, then if you don't know anybody, you're out of luck, right? And again, I'm playing with the words here to make my point, but the reality is it's about who you meet, right? And how you meet these folks and to build the skills such that you can develop your own social capital. The probably the biggest benefit of the road trippers out on the road, it's listed among the top few, but anecdotally, I would say it's at the very top, is the understanding of how not difficult it can be to start to build your own network by talking to people and simply asking, how did you get here? Now, to be fair, that is also the most unnerving thing, is to talk to somebody that you don't know and begin that conversation. So from what we've seen, if it's the scariest thing and also the most fulfilling, it's worth leaning into. What we've been trying to solve for, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know that it's a bit of a horizon goal, something we'll never perfectly get to, but the deepest impact we have, as you might imagine, is on those 3 road trippers with each one of these projects that we release. How do we replicate that experience for those who are not going to be hopping in one of our green RVs? Quick note, you saw that was the project that we did not use the gas-powered big RVs. I will be the first to acknowledge that when electric RVs become somewhat affordable, Roadtrip Nation is first in line. We've got 7 of these in our parking lot, and we talk about it often and are trying to figure out the numbers to be able to get there. But as you saw, have some projects where we ditch the RV and find other ways to do it. But in our effort to replicate what happens for those road trippers out on the road, what we have developed is something we call the Roadtrip Nation experience. And what this is a 5-lesson program that builds you up toward conducting your own interview with somebody you've never met. Old days, this was a 12-lesson workbook program designed to work across an entire semester. We primarily worked with the AVID program for releasing this in classrooms. But what we've learned, which seems a little obvious in retrospect, is making these things flexible, recognizing that it's going to be delivered in every classroom, after school program, one-stop shop a little bit differently, has become the idea. So in short, there are these 5 lessons that lead you up to the project itself, which is talking to a professional for advice. So the first 3 steps are really, letting go, as we talk about it, kind of shedding the noise of what you've heard and what you've been told. This is what you have to do, and these are the things you have to figure out. To define, which is connecting your own interest to the careers, understanding if there's something you're interested in, there actually is work related to it. And then become is kind of the step after conducting the interview and figuring out what your next steps are going to be from it. But this interview project is the work-based model that allows you to sit down with somebody you've never met, freak out a little bit over the process of cold calling or cold messaging somebody via LinkedIn, and having that discussion. The person that you interview as part of this process suddenly becomes part of your network. But more importantly, you've gone through the process of connecting to have a conversation with somebody you never met before. And that is core to figuring out the direction that you want to take in life, to learning what's possible, and finding that next opportunity. I'm going to play one more video. Some of this is going to look a little bit similar, but I think it's an important framing for what this 5-lesson program can be, and maybe something that would apply to the work you all are doing with students and young adults.
On your tombstone, at the end of the day, they're going to see 3 things. They're going to see your birth date, they're going to see that dash, and they're going to see your death date. The front and the back.
You all hear this? Great, thanks. Sorry.
They're done. But the thing that has the most importance to me is that dash. What happened in your life during the time you were born to the time you passed away? What defines you as a person?
Since 2001, we've been gathering wisdom and guidance from thousands of people through our award-winning documentary series, Roadtrip Nation, and our best-selling book, Roadmap. Now we've gathered all the knowledge we've found into this course.
You have to figure out who you are, and you have to tune out all the other voices, all of them.
I love to tell people there's a path for them. That path is possible, and you can access it, and here's the living proof.
Through these online lessons, you'll get exposure to all kinds of career paths, and you'll get a deeper understanding of who you are and what you truly want out of your career.
The point is this: we all come from someplace that we did not necessarily choose, but we can choose where we're going.
And most importantly, you're going to get the chance to actually have a meaningful conversation with somebody you're inspired by, where you'll gain valuable insights that are going to help you on the road ahead.
Talking to you, it gives me, it's like, you're like a superhero to me.
The whole time that we were interviewing her, I was just like, oh my God, I love you.
I've realized that there's so much I can do, and there's so many different places you can start.
The girl I am now, I feel so phenomenal.
Get started now.
I'm not going to play it, but there's also a video built into that program that's all about the cold calling process and reaching out to people you don't know. And it's just comical, right? If you've ever done any cold calling or reach out to somebody you don't know, and the nerves that come with it, watching other people go through it is actually really disarming. And you realize, oh, everybody's uncomfortable with this. So little things like that really help spark the process. What we provide and the content and tools we create are not the entirety of the solution by any stretch. We feel like we've got a very specific part of the process that we can help with. Programs are built and that allow folks to take that next step into a particular career, in a particular education direction. But there's a consistent message we hear across, whether it's nonprofits or higher education or K-12 or on the workforce side of it, is the initial engagement in the audience that you're trying to reach. If you're talking about future employees or folks who are trying to upskill within the market itself. And if you're talking about students who are at the very beginning of that journey, there's pressure, whether it should be there or is imagined or what have you. The pressure exists to determine a path now. And the reality is you need to determine steps now, right? Recognizing the path is going to reveal itself. But if you're not proving that it's possible by showing somebody that a young adult can relate to, you're going to have a tough time allowing them to take that first step. Just a couple of things before I wrap up and open it up to some questions. There is something else we'll send as a follow-up that may be helpful for your organization. It's a little disconnected from the student-focused part of it. It's a storytelling guide. That's basically Roadtrip Nation's philosophy on how to tell the story of your organization or your work or your class or your group without needing to hire a production firm or to have a massive communications team. There's a lot you can do with what you have as opposed to trying to be something an organization is not, right? We know where we fit. We try to do our best with it and then lean on others who can do things better than we can. So we'll share that as a helpful tool if it's of interest. And then the last thing I'll mention is we will be sending a slide deck as a follow-up as well that's got a little bit of the basics of what I just walked through, and then also some links to some of those tools that I mentioned and to some of our past projects if you're interested in poking around. So the last item here is some of the projects that we have upcoming for potential road trippers that we'll be promoting for. So right now there's an application open focused on the future of nursing. The idea is that there is a massive amount of opportunity in the nursing industry that is currently here and is coming in kind of a frightening way if we don't fill that pipeline. But this is a perfect example of the type of industry where you say, I don't want to be a nurse based on what I understand about nurses, so I'm moving on to something totally different than healthcare. And the reality is there's so many different roles that the vast majority of us don't understand within the nursing industry, and these stories will help bring those to life. All of this is going to be, even though the theme is broadly the future of nursing, all the filming is going to be happening in the state of Florida. So this is a particular case where we're kind of targeting geographically potential road tripper applicants in the state of Florida. So maybe not an ideal first one to mention to you all since it's so specific, but these other four that are mentioned are our next confirmed projects that will be on the road in 2025. One of them is focused on kind of our democracy, the future of democracy. We're talking less about the political side of it, although that's obviously mixed into it. It's really more about the process of disagreeing better and understanding that you can have differing views, land in a place where there can be multiple wins. And the reality is our social dialogue right now is I have an opinion and I will hold my ground for as long as I possibly can. And this will help us try to bring that conversation to the surface. Micro-credential pathways, essentially helping to change the narrative around it's 4-year or bust. Oh, and there are these alternative pathways over here. The reality is these pathways are equal across the board, but we have a tough time from a narrative standpoint across everyone. I'm included on that of being able to describe this the right way and show what those paths are by leveraging stackable credentials to build a successful career. Wellness, mental health, monster theme. We're actually working on the creative part of it right now with some of our thought leaders and experts and partners. And then also a partnership with American Student Assistance focused on career exploration earlier in the process, right? And being able to expose even as early as middle school what those opportunities may be, even though we don't suggest identifying the path in 7th grade and never veering away from it. So we will send this out as a link as well, and there's an attachment as well, and the links in here will take you to that current application that's open, but also the page where we post the other applications, which we do every couple of months. We launch about 8 or 10 of these projects every year. And the application will describe who the ideal road tripper is, but generally speaking, we're looking for young adults, looking to learn more about the theme that they have, that we're focused on, so that they can determine their own career and life path from there. So, that was a lot. I'm going to pause there, maybe take a sip of water, but open up to questions or anything else I can help clarify.
Thanks, Tim. All great information. We encourage everyone here to ask any questions. You can come off mute or leave it in the chat. But I will throw one at you while we get that going. Across all the interviews your road trippers and team have captured over the years, are there consistent themes and any advice to young career seekers that really stands out?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And the fun part about the amount of content we have is sometimes we'll do those demos and I'll go, oh, I didn't know we interviewed that person, right? It's hard to even consume all of it. There's a couple of things, some of them from an industry standpoint. So like, for example, healthcare and medicine, as is listed in some of our tools, comes up a lot. And I can't say for certain if that's because we have folks who are pretty far down that path and are trying to understand more, or if it's just a broad enough theme that there is interest in it. And the reality was, a few years ago, we didn't have nearly enough content in there to align with how many clicks that the healthcare industry was getting. So we focused on a project on the future of healthcare in the state of California. That, again, relevant in other places, but that's where the focus was on that front. And then obviously doing the nursing project now, and have been incorporating more about the future of health and health equity in some of our projects as well. So from an industry standpoint, that'll kind of go in waves. I think there are ones that kind of remain top of the list. But in terms of the consistency, it's really more about the skill development and the confidence in the skills that you have and are developing is the consistent message across many, many years of doing these projects. Over the last, I would say, and this is Tim talking, so don't quote me as some sort of expert in this, but over the course of the last 2 years, the conversation about skills-based hiring, the recognition of employers to change the hiring process, although that's going to take a while, right? It's not going to be the simple flip of a switch, is becoming more and more prominent, meaning there feels like there's hope, right? That we're going to move from kind of an old school resume to actually finding out what somebody can do when they're on the job. And what is consistent from the messaging of all of these folks that we've met, whether they were new or were aware of the term skills-based hiring, it's a reminder to recognize the skills you have, not necessarily from the formal education or from the part-time or full-time job that you have, but how many siblings did you have and what was your parents' work schedule, right? That right there determines what kind of skill set you've got in your hip pocket, and helping them understand how to explain that, how to point that out as a differentiator as they're trying to figure out what their next step is. So yeah, it's a really good question, but I would say the most consistent message throughout, even if folks aren't using the same words, are the questions about how do we take the skills I already have and apply them to the jobs that are here now and that are coming. I'm seeing the question in the chat here. Asia, I know you're probably looking at it too. Great question, awesome, in terms of the planning of the whole process. So the way this works is what we do kind of from the word go. So there are really two things we need in place to get a road trip off the ground. One are a collection of experts in that particular theme. We know a lot of things, but we're not necessarily the expert on the theme at the very beginning of it. And then secondly, we need to find the funding to get a project off the ground. We're a nonprofit, so we're primarily raising funds from corporate and foundation partners as we're getting these projects moving. The first thing that we do is go through what we call a creative process. Our creative director comes in and essentially goes through a series of guided brainstorms with our partners, funders and thought leaders and experts, sometimes one and the same, right? So for example, when we did the formerly incarcerated project, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative funded that project, and they had done quite a bit of research on that reentry process that we were able to use as a starting point. We developed a creative brief alongside those folks, basically asking all the questions from who is the ideal road tripper, meaning what is the persona of the people that we want to go on this trip? Age, lived experience, educational experience, et cetera. Secondly, we're looking at the ideal leaders that we want to interview, industries they come from, age, lived experience, background, et cetera, and then also the geographic focus. Sometimes the geographic piece of it is relevant. Sometimes it's not, right? Depending on the focus of the theme. But we build out as much as we can in that first conversation to develop the creative brief. Then we launch the application because we know who we're looking for. The road trippers go through a couple of steps. There's the first step is a relatively simple written application. And if they move on to the next phase, there's a video component where we're trying to balance not just these ideal personas we came up with in the creative process, but also matching them with each other such that there's a diversity of viewpoints within the project itself, knowing that they are going to be learning from each other in addition to learning from the folks that they're interviewing. We don't select the leaders that are going to be interviewed until we select the road trippers. Our production team does a lot of the legwork in terms of finding who we can interview and planning their route and so forth, but the road trippers are right there with us. We don't want this to be an assignment of people that they've been asked to interview. They are involved in helping us figure out who the ideal folks are that we are going to interview. Just running through these questions here. The creation of the content. No, if there's an interest level from the particular road tripper, they'll be chatting nonstop with our production crew because they're going to be living with them for 3 weeks. But this is not the kind of thing where you need production experience. We're not looking for journalists. We're not looking for YouTube influencers. We're looking for curious people who can connect with others and kind of be the eyes and ears of the exploration process for everybody who's going to see the content on the other side of it. Length of project, usually on the road for about 3 or 4 weeks. The documentary is usually ready 3 or 4 months after that for release on public television. And then we kind of distribute from there and keep pushing it over the next couple of years. The reality is there is a little bit of evergreenness to these conversations, right, that we're conducting, right, as opposed to this is how CPAs operate in this year. Tax code will change next year. Totally new documentary. So there is some evergreen nature to it. But certainly over time, things shift a little bit and the newer content has a bit more relevance. Cheryl, you're hitting me close to the heart on this. Where are they now? About 2 years ago, we did a project focused on the impact we had on the road trippers and did a little bit of the where are they now. At that time, there were maybe 250 road trippers. So not a massive amount of people, right? Our impact is primarily through the distribution of the content that they're central to. And so we're able to kind of determine what the impact was on those individuals. The social capital piece is what I mentioned. One of those things I mentioned before. Confidence, connection of education to career is another one of those pieces in terms of the impact that we have. But to your point about the follow-up series, there's been some discussion about finding a way to get a project funded that kind of flips the roles here a little bit, and that the leaders that we interview while we're out on the road are all former road trippers. Right now, this is an idea on the partnerships team, and we don't quite have the resources to do it. I even lobbied to get our founders to be the road trippers and get back out there on the road. Just a quick side note, our 3 founders did not expect it to be this. They did not expect to employ Allie and me 20 years ago when they started doing this. They borrowed an old 1985 RV, took 4 months out on the road, and basically just sat down with people and said, how'd you get here? They bought a video camera from Fry's Electronics that they plan to return in 90 days. And here we are 20 years later. They got some encouragement to write a book, got some connections with PBS to kind of help them think through what this could be. And now we're reaching 14 million students with the educational content that we create. So yeah, maybe this will help spark some conversations internally to figure out how to get that project off the ground.
Thanks, Tim. Those are all great questions. To go off of the content piece of that, since you guys are great content experts, it appears you're great at reusing and repackaging all of your content. So how do you continue to create evergreen pieces of content for new audiences? A lot of our staff here have, low capacity, like you also mentioned. So any tips for using stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be candid with you. The repackaging of content is not someone on the production side. I've learned over the years, it's not as simple. We already have the content, just create a new video. There's a lot more process to it. But with that said, from our end, that's our core competency. We're about 90 employees, and about half of that is on the production side of the house. So we feel we have this responsibility of all this content we've created over all these years. And there are pieces from 15 years ago that are no longer relevant, right? Either some things have changed in the world and it just doesn't quite make as much sense. Every once in a while, even a really relevant comment will have a flip phone in the background, right? Like, is that gonna fly, right? But what we spend a lot of our time doing is not just figuring out if the conversations we're having are relevant. That's something that just kind of gets refined with every single project that we do, but the format of the actual video asset. So for example, as you might imagine, over the course of the last several years, we've leaned more heavily into YouTube specific content versus just putting content on YouTube. Same thing with TikTok, for example. I'll be honest, we were a little nervous stepping into it because if we were going to do that, we needed to do it really well, right? And do it on a broad scale. And we're still very early stages by design on that front because we just want to make sure that we're landing in the right place on that front, knowing that most of our outlets are by putting content in the hands of organizations who are already working with those students or young adults. So for example, on our through our YouTube page, instead of maybe 5-6 years ago, it was kind of shortened versions of our documentaries posted on YouTube and crossing our fingers. We're going back and pulling content from multiple documentaries and packaging it in ways that are things like 5 careers for introverts, right? And so there's no way, it's not one project we filmed, but some of our production team is going back and finding the pieces that are relevant. To the point about only so much capacity, right? I think everybody's got a version of that conversation happening. I think things like this, in my humble opinion, but you all know this best, can be really helpful tools because there's an endless amount of tools you could use, right? And there are an endless amount of tools you could use that are no cost as well. You just have to find the ones that are going to save you as much time as possible and also hit the mark. Before coming to Roadtrip Nation, I worked at Boys and Girls Clubs of America for a number of years, and my role at one stretch of time for the national organization was to field the calls from organizations who were offering free tools to all 4 million young people across the country. And we got 5 or 8 of those calls every week. It was not a problem of finding people willing to get their things in front of the right students. It was a matter of contextualizing them in a way that they were going to be as helpful as possible. So I don't know how valuable that is, and I'm not necessarily sure that my advice is the one you should be leaning heavily on. But as you're looking for the right tools to say that, knowing the capacity you have, things that save you time and also get a student or young adult to lean in a little bit more, those are the things we hear from folks that certainly know better than we do.
No, great piece of advice. Give a little bit more time if anyone else has questions, but I will ask another question or two. How do you feel it empowers the youth on these trips to be part of telling their own stories?
Yeah, it's I think there's kind of twofold. One, the experience of the road trippers themselves, it doesn't happen on day one, right? They build their relationships with each other. They build relationships with that production crew that's behind the camera. And that's the value of the documentaries themselves, is you're not just hearing the content from the leaders, you're watching their journey and the progress that they are making. But the video content to the broader audience, I think the impact is primarily the confidence that you're not the only one that doesn't have any idea what to do right now, right? And that is something that doesn't ever really go away. You just, as time goes on, you get comfortable with that. Like, how would I know that, right? I've been through enough experiences, education and career, that uncertainty is simply a part of that experience. But that's not necessarily the case when you're at the beginning of that journey. So sure, providing more context as to what the semiconductor industry is going to look like in the next couple of years and how to get yourself onto that path from an entry-level standpoint so that you always have room to grow in this massive industry that's coming. Totally valuable, especially when contextualized. But the reality is the biggest value we see is understanding that you're not by yourself in this, because we operate in a world, right, where you get snippets of very strong opinions or snippets of perfection, right? And we all do it. I mean, again, I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing. I'm not coming out of my lawn and yelling for the kids to get off the grass here, right? This is some version of the world we've always lived in, and it's very much one we're in right now. Recognizing what problems that can cause, not saying it's going away or should, but recognizing what problems it can cause is really important. And the problems it can cause is not understanding that perfection's not really what's happening, right? It's a representation of a moment. So that confidence that it's totally okay to not know what the next step is, and to be ready for a completely non-linear journey, even if you're staying in the same industry, is something that's incredibly valuable from what we've seen, both from the studies that we've done about our work, but just generally speaking, when we're talking to young adult audiences and folks like you all that certainly know better than we do of what the day-to-day process has been. And I'd say most notably over the last several years as the world got flipped upside down a couple of times on us.
Yeah, very relevant. Okay, I think we'll ask one more question and then see if we have anything else and wrap up. So you mentioned how one of the most important ways to build a career path is your network and who you know. Other than meeting somebody and adding someone to your network, why is it so important to talk to people when building your career trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we often mean, and I'm as guilty as anybody by saying, meet more people because they may be the hiring manager of a job you want, right? Sure, that's part of it, but that's not really what we're getting at, right? Because the conversation so quickly turns to whatever percentage of jobs secured or through someone you know versus, applying blindly, right? So that argument's important and I think relevant, but I also think it can kind of cut the legs off of the value of it. You are only exposed, you only know the things that you're exposed to, right? And so you can watch all the video content in the world, you can watch every documentary possible, you can read all the ONET data and understand what all of these jobs are. But until you're having a discussion with somebody about what you think you're interested in, what you think you want to do next, and getting a response, whether that's encouragement or somebody else's story that sparks from some comment you made, you're probably not seeing the full picture that's even in your brain about where your interests truly lie, right? So I'm kind of loosely and unofficially describing therapy on some level, right? What is the perspective that I'm missing from the world I'm operating in and the value of having those conversations? And not just one, right? Doing the project in that 5-lesson program is not going to lead to, I got it, don't need to talk to anybody else, right? What it's doing is preparing you for the realities of being able to have discussions about what's out there. I'd say it's curiosity, right? Curiosity in your own job when your head is down and you're not working with anybody else to try to solve that problem. But curiosity in terms of what else is out there and what else you could be considering is the kind of thing that you're anecdotally hearing from people that are talking about what they're looking for and people they want to be around. But even more specifically, these are the kinds of skills, these are the kinds of tools you're seeing in nearly every job posting across the country. Some, of the top 7 of the top 10 skills listed in the, job postings across the U.S. are durable, soft SEL power skills of some sort, right? And understanding what those skills are and the fact that they are skills and not just innate traits often comes from having a discussion with somebody who's seeing the world a little bit differently than you are.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tim, and thank you to the team at Roadtrip Nation for creating so many useful resources. This has been an exciting session. The tools on your site seem super useful and reassuring for someone who's interested and unsure about what their next move would be in the workforce. So thank you guys again.
And just add one thing, Natalie, I saw your question in the chat. There'll be a deck that comes out as a follow-up. There's a few links at the end of the deck that I would suggest kind of keeping an eye on. You can sign up for the e-newsletter on there, and that's probably the best way to keep an eye on the applications that'll open up. But the link to the actual application page is there. But do not hesitate to reach out with any questions for us, ideas, what ifs, ideas for road trips. It's a fun part of this job is that folks saying, I just met you, but I got an idea for your work. That's fabulous. We love that, right? So anything you got, send our way. And yeah, we'll be staying in touch and maybe popping up to share some of these other opportunities for the applications as time goes on. But thank you all and keep up the good work. And thanks for taking the time to kind of think about what else you could be doing because I imagine those to-do lists are pretty lengthy in the middle of a week. So thank you all very much. And to the Core Network, thank you very much for having us.
Well, thank you. And just a few reminders from the Core Network. We will be sending out an email with a recording of the session and resources. You can also find them under our events tab and click on webinars. A few dates to flag. October 9th, we'll be hosting an informational session about the annual profile. The profile is the Core Network's annual request for data from all of our member organizations. So join the session for tips on how to submit your organization's annual profile. On the afternoon of October 22nd and 23rd, the Core Network will be hosting a virtual core member development summit. We'll be offering sessions on a range of topics, including personal finances, climate science, diversity, equity, inclusion, and more. On November 2nd through 4th, the Core Network will be hosting our annual Core Rendezvous. The location this year is the Calwood Education Center in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Jamestown, Colorado. And finally, the Core Network is currently accepting workshop proposals and award nominations for CoreCon 25. We value all the session proposals and nominations we receive. The award nomination forms are due November 1st and workshop proposals November 8th. And that is all. So thank you so much.